What's going on, everybody? So as you may be aware, there is a big transition going on in the phone tech world right now. If you guys are not quite familiar with what's going on, there seems to be a transition with iPhone users switching over to Android phones. So let's go ahead and talk about it, because I have some thoughts about why this transition is happening for a lot of people, and myself included. So I'm really actually excited to see this going on. And for someone that kind of like, I would say, always used to go back and forth with dibbling dabbling with softwares at a time, this is good. This is actually really good for the tech community. So in this video, I'm going to share my 5 reasons as to why people may be switching from the iPhone over to an Android phone. So this is an exciting video for me to do, because this is one of the things I like to talk about. So this is where we can talk about some of the things that's going on, whether it be in the tech community or something related to another topic here. We're going to go ahead and dive into the 5 reasons as to why I think people are making the switch, or, having an Android phone as part of their, rotation. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get into the first reason, I want to highlight within the topic that I think people are making the switch because there's just a lot happening. And one thing I will talk about maybe a little bit more later in the video is that first, there is nothing wrong with testing things out, trying new things that is new to you, and just seeing what's out there. I do think that people should be able to enjoy the best of both worlds. And as someone who is hardcore iPhone/Apple product user, I am one that have really barely recently understood that it's good to have the best of both worlds that helps your life and benefits your life. So with that at the forefront, I definitely want to be a person that, not just moving forward with tech, but understanding that there are multiple platforms that can benefit you and that can offer very good functionality and be user-friendly to your life and just add that convenience. So if you are new to my channel, that is something that I do talk about quite, often, where I find convenience to be very important to my life. So yeah, if you're one of those people and you're all about conveniency, then I think this is a good time, especially in the tech world where things are more compatible, more adaptable, and there's just no reason to limit yourself and limit what you can use in life. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into it. So as you can see, I have my iPhone, and then I have my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, which I've had for a month now, and I am just pretty much obsessed with this phone right here. So I am planning on making a separate video where I talk about how much I've been enjoying this phone so far. I've had it for a month now, and it has been amazing to use. It's technically not officially my daily driver because I don't have a SIM card in it, but I use it for pretty much everything now. So yeah, so far, let me just go ahead and tell you guys that I am absolutely loving this phone. I'm pretty much obsessed with this phone right here. So again, this will be a separate video, so hopefully you guys stay tuned for that. Got a little beverage right here to kick us off. I do have my notes here, so they're kind of like the things that I was thinking about and kind of just jotting down of the reasons why I think people are making the transition from an iPhone to an Android phone. And another point I wanted to highlight is the fact that because there are so many Android phones available from different companies, it does add options, which I do feel like people are definitely branching out into opening up their options. Now that could fall into another reason that I will talk about a little bit more. So you may see more people picking up the Samsung phone. Me being one of those people, I am more familiar with Samsung phones. I've used Android in the past when it first dropped on the scene many years ago, but Samsung is obviously a huge competitor in the Android world. So Samsung tends to be a little bit more familiar to people. And I will say to that point is I do think there's a reason reason for that, and that is the software. So with that being said, you know, there are tons of options out there, but however, Samsung is really good at the software side of things for Android, and I do think people gravitate to Samsung, or at least, you know, considering Samsung first. But there are so many other great options out there, like the Google Pixel, like the Nothing phone, Oppo phone, and just all of the other competitors out there in the Android world that definitely offer really good functionality, which is the first reason I think people are making that transition over from an iPhone to an Android phone. So when it comes to functionality, I do think functionality is one of the main reasons. I do think people are just looking for what works pretty much. So you definitely need something to work, and you definitely need something to fit your lifestyle, all the different, you know, tech and softwares that you use on a daily basis, whether that be what type of software your TV has, what type of software that is just compatible with others. And for me personally, that was one of the reasons why I look back into have Android as a part of my lifestyle. So Android definitely fits into that world now. And if you didn't know, I used to have a Samsung Note 10 Plus. I absolutely really liked that phone. That phone was so clutch to me, and it was a little bittersweet to, you know, trade it in when I got the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But there were some things that I felt like Apple finally adopted that had me transition back to an iPhone. Again, a little bit of a different video, but I will mention that is one of the key things for me. So functionality is huge to me, and it seems like it may be one of those things that other people are considering to be, whether that be like actually saying or acknowledging that it's functionality, but just, you know, subconsciously seeing the benefits of an Android phone and the software of an Android phone. So the power of Android is across multiple platforms. So the TVs I own are Google TVs. That is the software of them. And for me personally, I have been loving the Google platform for my TVs, and it just has integrated, which we will talk a little bit more about that later on. It has integrated so well into my life that I just find it so easy to use it across multiple devices. And that includes on my iPhone, because I do have Google accounts. So with that being said, like when I go to, you know, use my iPhone before I even got my Samsung, I found that the Google platform was just so user-friendly and just adapted so well with my iPhone. So that was one of the first indicators for me that functionality of using it across multiple devices is very important. For me, I will say, you know, maybe eventually that could be the same for others, but I definitely think just solely functionality, how well it works, is a big deal for people, because as time moves faster, we want things to work pretty much seamlessly and smoothly, right? So if you're one of those people that just definitely want things to work, of course things has it times where it's not working as well or there's a bug going on, but outside of that, like the software works so smoothly. As we know, things are not perfect. So when things are working and majority of the software is working, for me, 95% of the time, I deem it as a very good, smooth platform or product. So functionality is the first reason. All right, so moving along into reason number 2, which is Samsung's UI, which UI stands for user interface. And one of the big reasons I personally, you know, moved back to Samsung is because I am familiar with Samsung, but I do think there are really good other options out there on other Android phones. I know that your other Android competitors have their own UI, or as it is called, skin, on top of the Android software itself. So that is one of the key things for me, and could be a key thing for everyone else. So of course there are other competitors out there, such as the Google phones, Nothing phone, Oppo phone, and then there are just like good other options out there. I do think people are trying out Samsung phones first, at least as their first option, just to get familiar with the Android platform. I don't necessarily think that's a bad choice. I feel like you can't go too wrong with the Samsung phone, at least as your first test. So that way, you know, you're getting at least a supported company's software. You're getting a good, solid user interface. Definitely think if you really want to start off your Android journey, you definitely want to start off with a strong software, because the software is a huge piece of the phone. Even if the hardware is not the best, again, it goes back to that functionality. You definitely need it to work. work. The UI of Samsung is clean. It is much better looking, in my opinion, than previously. When I had my Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, the skin of Samsung, it looked okay. It was definitely a transition to get accustomed to coming from an iPhone. To be completely honest with you guys, I'm not even sure what Android version I had or was using at the time when I had my Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus. I would just say it definitely felt different. But outside of that, the phone worked very well. The whole lag thing was definitely out the door by then. So to be honest, iOS wasn't perfect back then either. Fast forward to present now, both softwares are amazing. So that's one thing that I think that people are seeing when they're doing their research, is how user-friendly the software is for Samsung phones if you're getting a Samsung phone, and that being one of the key things that you're finding, that is a user-friendly user interface. That is another important key detail for people. So yeah, in my opinion, I feel like the user interface has to be very easy to figure out and use and get accustomed to. Like if you want a more in-depth look, you can customize that, which will fall into another reason as well. Or if you want to have a more minimal look, you can definitely, create that. There's just so much that you can do to kind of tailor it to your taste. All right, so on that note, we're going to talk about customization. So customization is just one of those things that I feel like people have found to be really nice to have. Even if you're not a very customizable person, the option is there. As we change as people, we tend to like different things at times. To have a solid customization support in the software is a game changer. At least I find it to be very important, and maybe other people seem to think so. When you get bored with your phone, I don't know about y'all, but switching phones, it can be quite expensive, and everybody's budget is different. So what if you just want to switch how your phone looks? I think that is a huge game changer for people, at least for myself. I definitely find like when I switch up my phone, how it looks and how it can feel at times, it's almost like having a new phone. And that helps with making sure you can just retain your phone a little bit longer, not feeling like you always have to upgrade. And that's one of the things I find to be a little bit more possible with using an Android phone. So with an iPhone, yes, there are a few things you can change now as far as like widgets. If we're talking about customizing how your home screen looks, but it is still a very limited change or limited options. So as you can see, I have my calendar as a widget. I like my calendar to be a little bit more open, expanded, and I can view exactly what's going on for that day. Now, I'm not the hugest customizing person out there. I tend to keep things at default for a while before I even consider switching it up. That's because I like to learn how it looks first, and then I get into changing and switching things up. But with an iPhone, I just find that it's really not too much of a need for me to switch how things look. So as you can see, I haven't changed too much on my iPhone. Now, this works for some people. It's totally fine because, again, I am one person that didn't find customizing super important before until now. Now, there are tons of videos out there of how you can make your iPhone look different, and those are cool. I will say I haven't watched too many of them, and they may require like downloading a app to assist with those type of customizations, which for me personally, I like things to be built into the software. Again, that's not a bad thing to have a third-party source to customize things, but for me personally, I like it to be a default setting. That way I know it is supported by the phone company itself. Again, you can find different things to customize your iPhone. I haven't personally tested it out, but yeah, definitely do your research like with anything else. Other than that though, again, nothing wrong with the minimal look at all. Sometimes that is preferred, but again, it's more about the options of customization that you have built in. All right, so diving into reason number 4 now. So reason number 4, we're going to talk about offers, and just in the simplicity of what iOS offers versus the Android software can offer. So with this reason, we're talking about what Apple offers versus what an Android phone company will offer. So just in the simplicity of it, I'm going to try my best to keep it fairly simple of the couple of things that I think of, but this can be a whole video on its own, a whole topic we can discuss. But I will say, for just a couple of different reasons that people may be switching or transitioning over to an Android phone, is that Apple offers are very very limited. We all know by now that one of Apple's goals is to definitely get you more into their ecosystem, get you to use pretty much everything Apple, which is not a bad business perspective, right? But the thing is with that is that you're closing off your market and limiting your compatibility to only your supported engineered software. Again, there's nothing wrong if you're interested in that and you cool with that. Again, me being one of those people, I am a hardcore Apple user, so I have a MacBook and the ecosystem is amazing. That is no doubt. Getting into that, what are the limitless options out there that are available amongst other companies that are more compatible with each other? However, on the flip side of that, so a lot of times you run into applications that are really thinking about Apple's software first in their development, but I do think that's kind of switching up a little bit. And for any developers out there, definitely feel free to let me know if that is really changing behind the scenes as far as like applications supporting more of the Android software. We know Google is a powerhouse. Definitely let me know because I'm very interested to see if there's a transition in development as well. I feel like there are more apps that are opening up that door to have better functionality on an Android phone and making sure that apps work just as good on Android like they do on iOS. At least for me, I will say I am seeing a difference there. The offers for an Android phone are just much more vast than, Apple's. So again, it falls into those other reasons that we talked about with functionality and customization. And the offering that I see that Android brands tend to have just really support what people like today. And people like options. People also like discovering new things. People don't want to wait so long for something. As we see new tech, AI, all these things are integrated and we don't want to see a delay in that stuff. So I will say I definitely think Android is a little bit more forward and working through those things and making sure things like that run very smoothly. All right, so talking about the last reason here, and that is integrations. Now, for me, integrations has become more of a prominent thing to keep an eye on. Again, all this stuff kind of intertwines with one another and they really overlap, but I do think it's important to like separate things out a little bit more. That way you can understand how it really works and if it really benefits you. With that, integrations. So as I just mentioned, how Apple can tend to keep a little bit more of a tight knit for their brand. And I will say integration is a big thing just moving forward in the tech world. From what I can tell, it may be helpful to integrate with another company that is a little bit more focused on that particular functionality. There's that word again. And then collaborate with others that are focused in other areas. And essentially you'll be learning from each other, if you kind of got that business relationship. I know that was a part a little bit more on the professional side of things, but when we're just talking to common life, everyday life, I think integrations is key in how people can see the benefit of it. Again, if you're a user of multiple platforms and you see someone's integrating, then that could be a big deal for you. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things I kind of noticed a little bit more just within my month of getting back to an Android phone. And maybe that's not the forefront, but I will say, when you learn that when something works well with something else, then you'd be like, hold up, that's a big deal. I kind of like that. I kind of like how they both working together. You can tend to gravitate to that as well. And that's probably why I would mention it as number 5, because again, it's not at the forefront maybe for some people, but as you use something a little bit more, as you come across other tech and just other devices that you use in your everyday life, it could be a big deal. So with that, I'm gonna keep it cute on integrations because those are my 5 reasons as to why I think people are transitioning over to Android. Now, the whole topic about if an Android phone is your primary phone or your daily driver, that can definitely be another topic. On my channel, this is a judgment-free zone. There's no such thing as jumping on a bandwagon. Listen, if you want to try something out, try it out, test it out. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to find what works for you. And what works for you may be using an Android phone that is supported more so than ever, and definitely has more functionality to your life. So with that being said, definitely let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know, of course, if you're switching, if you're considering it, we can talk about it. We can get down to the nitty gritty. If you're a person that has been using both, definitely share your thoughts. I am new to the best of both worlds life now. I feel like there's way more options as far as being being more budget friendly out there when it comes to Android phones. So don't be afraid of the used market as well. My Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 is used and I picked it up on eBay. So don't be afraid of the used market. You can find some really good deals out there, and definitely finding something that fits within your budget is so important. And that way you're not having to break the bank to try something new. So when it comes to foldables, that is a totally different topic, and I definitely honed in on getting a foldable phone. But again, you guys, let me know your thoughts. Why do you think there could be such a big transition amongst other people with switching over to Android, whether that be as their primary phone or just testing it out as a potential primary phone? The options are endless now. Again, I like the fact that people are, transitioning out and trying different things. It helps with the market. All right, you guys, so those are my thoughts. Like, the fact of getting back into the Android world has opened up just so much more content to watch. It's crazy. So I've been enjoying this world. And yeah, I know I'm just scratching the surface. So I hope to be sharing my experience with my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6. I know the Z Fold 7 is coming up. I don't know, a lot to think about with that. If I'm this happy with my Z Fold 6, who knows, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you guys, that's gonna wrap it up for this particular video. So I hope you guys consider subscribing if you haven't already, and just all the YouTube things. And with that, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.